So where we left off in the last video was down here in the summary section. What do we mean? What are we looking for in the summary section? You've got two tasks, essentially, when you're summarizing. After you've already read your own notes, after you've already looked at your own head talk a second time and maybe added some more as you went through, that's going to give you a bigger, clearer view for doing the two tasks of summarizing. I call them sifting and combining. Now, to get what I mean, you're going to have to know what we mean by sifting, and maybe you do. But if you don't, think about playing in a sandbox when you were a kid, and they had a plastic strainer that looked kind of like that, often in the sandbox. My wife and I were out walking around this last weekend. We passed a backyard with a sandbox in it, and there was one of those in that sandbox. So they're still around today. It's not just your teacher, the dinosaur, who remembers old-fashioned stuff. Well, what you're doing with the strainer there in a sandbox as you're a kid, you're sitting in the sandbox, and quite often the sandbox has gotten other stuff in it over time. There's gravel, there's little rocks, there's broken glass, there's cat poo, or whatever else, and you're taking that strainer and getting some sand and going shaky, 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 and all the nice smooth sand that it's nice and cushy to sit on comes through the bottom of the strainer. And it catches the rocks, it catches the glass, it catches the cat poo, or whatever else is in there, and you take it and you flick it out, right? Or another way to think about sifting is this kind. Maybe like literally this kind, or maybe the kind that has like the aluminum cylinder with a crank on it, and you turn the crank, putting flour in the cylinder. It's doing the same thing. It's basically catching like bigger clumps, and it's making them break down into softer, finer flour. And kind of like the sandbox analogy, the stuff that you want to keep is the stuff that goes through the sifter, and you toss away all the stuff that gets clumped up across in the top section. Well, see, that's where our analogy breaks down, because we're not getting rid of the stuff we catch when we sift. We're basically doing the kind of sifting that this lady's doing with her metal detector. Basically like gold prospecting, sort of kind of right? She's taken that strainer in a riverbed and gone through and scooped up the stuff from the bottom and lifted it up, and the water takes a lot of the dirt and the silt and leaves the golden nuggets that are worth keeping. That's really the analogy that we're making. You've probably written a lot of stuff in your notes section, and a lot of it was worth writing down to help you get the story. But not all of it needs to be kept. You're just looking for the biggest, most important ideas. You're mentally sifting through your notes to find the gold nuggets that need to be kept. Sort of kind of like, what are the only things on that page that absolutely, positively have to be known by everybody in class, no matter what you chose to write down? That's what we mean by the sifting. And it's not just sifting, it's sifting and combining. Meaning, when you know what the big ideas are, if any of them fit together, save yourself some time and save yourself some space by combining them down below. So like, for example, I personally happen to do my summary section with bullet points. I'll make a little dash and I'll write a something, and then I'll make another dash and then I'll write a something. But a lot of my students don't do that, and that's okay. They write paragraph style for their summaries. And if you want to do the same thing, you can too. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But the point is, you can save yourself some space if some of the ideas that you've sifted can actually fit together. I'll do that all the time, where one of my little bullet points will actually combine two things that I think fit really well from up above. It's a way to shorten up your summary to make it nice and tight so that everything in there is just the gold nuggets that are necessary from the page.